Irene, maybe you can tell us what is punctuation.
Punctuation is actually the art of
Irene, you're breaking. We can't hear you. I don't know what is happening on your side. You are breaking. Irene, you're breaking. We can't hear you. Maybe Emma, you can assist Irene. Emma, I know you can hear me. Can you assist Irene? She was trying to explain what punctuation is.
Well, I think punctuation is the use of maybe spacing, the use of commas and those question marks.
What about Stephen? Stephen, what do you understand by the term punctuation?
Much as full stops, commas.
Yes, when you talk about punctuation, we talk about actually making your writing sound. When you're talking about making your writing sound, is to make your writing that when someone reads, he can actually tell what you mean. Punctuation is one of the most important element in English because sometimes you would wish to say something, but because of how you have punctuated your sentence, it becomes difficult for somebody to understand. For example, where the question mark was supposed to be, you are putting it where maybe a full stop is supposed to be. Or maybe you are putting a question mark and the next sentence you are starting it with a small letter, which is very wrong. Or maybe where a comma should be, you are putting a full stop. And where a full stop should be, you are putting another mark. Now that one makes it difficult. It makes it difficult for somebody to understand what you are saying or what you mean. So definitely in every topic we usually start with introduction, and this particular topic I will start by saying that it only highlights on the points of punctuation, which is to make writing easier to read. So the one of the most important thing or one of the most important reasons why we punctuate is to make sentences easier for us to read. It also describes the counterpart of the pauses and inflections that help to make speech understandable. It also put more emphasis that it doesn't necessarily follow that everywhere you would pause in a speech you should punctuate in writing. It's not everywhere that you pause in writing that you should punctuate. Like most of the time when I'm doing dictation, when we are in a physical class, I hope we will meet in a physical class. Whenever I'm doing dictation, whenever I'm dictating my notes to students, I usually pause. Make a lot of pauses for to enable the student to do what to enable the student or to give the student that time of writing. So I make various pauses and various repetitions. Now those pauses does not mean that I should put a full stop or commas. No, it doesn't mean that. So you're told it does not necessarily, that one we have said, and sometimes the strength of punctuation mark differ from the length of the equivalent pause in speech. That one is very true. So what are some of the objectives that we are, or at the end of this topic, what are we supposed to have learned, or what skills must we have acquired, or should we have acquired after this particular class? So as far as this particular topic is concerned, number one, you'll be able to appreciate punctuation practice that is constantly changing. Punctuation practice that is constantly changing. You come to realize that the way people used to punctuate or the way things used to happen maybe like 20 years ago. Things are happening differently. Even when writing what we call an application letter, today's application letter, when you look at it, the format is different from the one that we used to write maybe 20 or 15 years ago. So at this point, again, another objective is to explain the importance of keeping your language clear and simple. And one of the most important reason why you should keep your language clear and simple is for easy understanding, and for people actually to know what you want to say or what you are saying. So actually, you are advised, especially when you're writing, make sure that your speech is short. I remember when I was in high school, when we used to write composition, and even in primary school, our teacher used to tell us that whenever you are writing, make your writing short. Don't make your sentence long, because long sentences also gives you the leeway to make mistakes. You can make a lot of mistakes when you have a very long sentence. But when you have a very short sentence, especially simple sentences, you come to realize that mistakes are minimized. So most cases, make sure that your language is clear and simple and short. The next objective is that to check all your work to make sure that everything you write obeys the rules of grammar and punctuation. So those are the objectives that at the end of the day, we should have, or we must have, or we must be able to meet those objectives. So the main reasons for punctuation actually is to make your writing easier to read. It is the counterpart of the pauses and inflections that help to make speech understandable. But when we say that, we mean, but it doesn't necessarily follow that everywhere you would pause in a speech, you should actually punctuate. This one we have already said. And sometimes the strength of punctuation mark differs from the length of the equivalent pauses in a speech. So in short, we are saying that punctuation should be based on sound, logical principles. So do not try to force your punctuation practice. Do not force a comma to be where a full stop should be, or a semicolon where maybe a question mark should be. So do not try to force your punctuation practice into format that defies current usage. Like, for example, in most cases, and this one you'll bear me witness, you realize that when you want to put an emphasis, maybe you're asking somebody a question, where are you? And you want to put an emphasis. Some of us end up putting several question marks. Is that true, Irene? You end up putting a lot of question marks. Maybe you are angry. Where are you? Maybe somebody has kept you waiting in town since maybe 8, and you are supposed to meet at 8, and this person is on his way, and it is around 11:30. You tend to get angry, and you write even with what we call capital letters, and you put a lot of question marks to show how angry you are, or to show emphasis. Also remember when I was in high school, especially when I did what we call maybe English cut, or maybe a composition, and maybe it was not that pleasing to the eyes of the teacher. A teacher would put a star there, and he would write "see me" with a lot of exclamation marks to show emphasis. I don't know that you experienced this. Irene, did you experience? No, Irene is not here. Emma, did you experience this?
Yeah.
Yeah, when the teacher wants to show some kind of emphasis, he puts a lot of exclamation mark. Also, yeah, I also think, Stephen, also you experienced this. Anyway, that is not right. By putting a lot of exclamation mark or putting a lot of question mark, it does not show emphasis. One exclamation mark, as far as punctuation rules are concerned in English, is enough. So you're told don't try to force your punctuation practice into a format that defies current usage. Punctuation practice is constantly changing. That one we have already said. For example, sentences are shorter than they used to be. Nowadays, sentences are shorter than they used to be. So there are no more full stops in a text. You know, a long time ago, you used to put full stop everywhere. It is full stop, etc. In general, there is less punctuation. You come to realize that in our writings, there are usually less punctuation. Those people who are fond of reading novels and magazines and newspapers, you come to realize that those sentences, you rarely meet a full stop, a comma, etc. Why? Because nowadays, sentences are shorter. There are few intermediate stops, such as commas. You also come to realize that full stops are no longer seen as necessary to mark abbreviation and contractions. Nowadays, full stop are not used that much. And in headlines, especially when you're reading a newspaper, you come to realize that stand fast and captions. Captions are those writings that describe what is in the picture. They are usually very rare. In fact, you come to realize that they are very rare, and so on and so forth. Now, I want us to look at one punctuation mark, and we are starting with, in this particular topic, I will look at various punctuation marks. But as far as I look at various punctuation marks, I'm not looking at all, because if we were to look at all punctuation marks, we are going to have like 5 lessons on punctuation marks. So I'm going to look at the most common punctuation marks. And the first one, we are going to look at capital letters. So when you talk about capital letters, what do we mean? So these are usually used at the beginning of a sentence. This one is commonly known. They are usually used at the beginning of the sentences. And for the names of people, remember we did what we call parts of speech, and we talked about common, what we call proper nouns. And when you use capital letters, we use them sometimes, not sometimes, but always, we use them when we write the names of people and places. They're also used at the beginning of words, which are titles, rather than a description. For example, we can write about the government of Kenya. You can write about the government of Kenya. And when you're writing about the government of Kenya, the word government starts with a capital letter, and the word Kenya also starts with a capital letter. Because these are the title of one specific body. These are the titles of one specific body, which is the government, and, which is the government of Kenya. But we write of agreement between governments. We write of agreement between governments because we are speaking about governments in general. So whenever you're writing about governments in general, governments, actually the word government, maybe you're talking about the government of Kenya, government of Ethiopia, and government of maybe Sri Lanka. If you're talking about these 3 governments, we don't write government in capital letter. So we have said capital letters are used at the beginning of a sentence. They are used when you're writing the names of people and places. And they are also used when you're writing about a general what? A general or a specific body, like the government of Kenya. But that unless you're talking about many governments, then that is when you write government in small letter. Do you have any question on that before I move to something else? If you have any question, maybe you can ask. So if there is no question, then we move to something else. And this one is a full stop. These are full stops. How do we use full stops? Full stops are also known as periods. Full stops are also known as periods. And they are used at the end of sentences. They are used at the end of sentences. They are used at the end of sentences as decimal points and with certain standard abbreviated places. Like, for example, America. Maybe you are writing something like this, America, California. Let me show you. Maybe you are writing something like this. Maybe you're writing America, California. So we use a full stop at the word car to mean it's California. So sometimes we use full stop as shown. Sometimes full stop can be used in, for example, when you're talking about numbers, or maybe, for example, when you shorten something like, maybe you want to talk about somebody like Victoria. Like, for example, you are talking about Victoria, sir. So this is how you put it. Maybe you want to write the word Victoria, or to write the short name of Victoria. So you can write like that, Vic, to mean Victoria. Or maybe you want to write David, but you want to use Dave. So you can write this, or Dav, to mean David, or something like that. Or professor, maybe you want to write the word professor. So you write prof. So the moment you write prof, a full stop should follow after that. Those are the rules of grammar. Or maybe you want to write the name doctor, but you end up writing doc. Doc, not DOC, doc, like that. So a full stop must follow to show that you have not actually said the whole name the way it's supposed to be said. So can we have other uses of what we call full stop from us? Maybe Irene, you can tell us the uses of a full stop. 2 uses of a full stop.
It's used when writing dates.
It is used when writing dates. For example, we can write the date like this. Today is 12, I'm assuming 11.20, maybe 19. So they are used like that. Continue.
It's also used when writing letters, specifically when writing the PO box.
The PO box. Yeah,
Yes.
when you're writing like something like this, I'm putting it there. Something like this. This is what Irene means. Then the next person should be Emma. Emma, tell us, what are some of the uses of full stops?
When abbreviating, in abbreviation, yeah.
For example,
And BOM, BOM,
BOM,
EG,
or abbreviation. You're talking about, let's say, for example, you're talking about KPLC. So it is K, P, L, and C, like that.
yes.
What else?
I think okay.
Maybe Stephen, you can help.
Writing dates.
Yeah, writing dates. That one has been said by Irene. Continue.
Websites.
Yeah, when you're writing about websites, you can write www dot maybe something like that.
And also, what's it called? After command.
After a command, for example,
Close the door.
let me put it down. Close the door. Then I should put a full stop.
Yeah.
That's not a command. Anyway, you have tried, but you'd have said that we use a full stop at the end of the sentence to mark the end of that particular idea. Remember when we are in high school, the teacher used to tell us that if you want to show us that that is the end of that particular idea, you actually put a full stop. Like maybe, for example, you've been told to describe my car. So the first paragraph, we are looking at the color of this particular car of mine. So the moment you write, my car is beautiful, or my car is beautiful. The moment you put full stop, that tells us that you are done describing your car as far as beautiful is concerned. So it's actually, when you put a full stop, it means that you are done with that particular idea and you are now on the next part of explaining. The next punctuation mark is what we call a comma. The next punctuation mark is a comma. The next punctuation mark, which is point C, is comma. So let's look at the uses of a comma. So the comma, first of all, is in written English, acts very much like a pause. I remember when I was in high school, our teacher used to tell us that when you put a comma, it means that you are taking a break so that you can take some oxygen or relax. Then you continue. You continue with maybe reading or writing or something like that. So when you put a comma, it shows it is a pause. You have paused a little bit, maybe to take some oxygen or something. So it's like a pause in a spoken language, and it is used within sentences to actually separate phrases or list of words. For example, I'm giving an example there. I'm giving an example. We have this particular kind of an example. The company, and the example is the company which the company, you have been the company, comma, which was only set up last year, comma, now produces a range of goods including tires, steering wheels, exhaust systems, and windscreen. Now you can see there are so many pauses. Like after the word company, there is a pause. After the word year, there is a pause. And after the word, and when we are talking about the classification of goods that the company produces, there are pauses there to show varieties. So in short, a comma can be used to actually show varieties. So when you look at that particular sentence, you come to realize that there is no comma before there is no comma before there, and at the end of the list. So we don't put comma before, we have not put comma before the word there, and we have not put the comma at the end of the list. Why? Because comma should only be inserted to help reading or listening, because commas should be inserted to help in reading or listening. If there are several commas in a sentence, then it is probably too long. It is probably that that particular sentence is very long and should be split into separate sentences. So we have various uses of commas. Like, for example, we use commas. Number one, we use commas to separate a series of words of the same kind. We use comma to separate a series of words of the same kind. For example, he ordered a rich chocolate. He ordered a rich chocolate sponge cake. Again, when you're talking about that, do not use comma when a series of adjectives is cumulative. Do not use comma. I think that example was supposed to be used. So we can actually start by saying that use the comma to separate a series of words of the same kind, but always avoid using comma when a series of adjective is cumulative. For example, I'm saying he ordered, this is the example that I'm reading. The example is this one. He ordered a rich chocolate sponge cake. So you don't use a comma when you talk about, when you're talking about a series of adjectives. Like, for example, maybe Irene, you can tell us, can you see some adjectives there? And if you see them, can you show us, or can you read for us the adjectives? Irene.
Yes.
In this particular sentence, he ordered a rich chocolate sponge cake. Can you tell us the adjectives, where adjectives are?
Ordered.
Ordered is an adjective.
Yes.
What is an adjective, Irene?
An adjective is a word that is used to give more information.
Give more information
about a noun.
about a noun.
Yes.
Irene, I think you are wrong. When you talk about, okay, you have the explanation of what an adjective is right? Because when you talk about an adjective is a word that is used to describe a noun. Like, for example, when you talk about beautiful, beautiful is a noun. I mean, it's an adjective describing the noun. Like when I say, Irene, you are very beautiful. When you talk about beautiful, we are describing you, Irene. So therefore, when you talk about an adjective, we are talking about a word that is used to describe a noun. When you talk about an adverb is a word that is used to describe how a action was done. So it is a word that is used to describe an adjective. Like, she walked majestically. So the word majestically is an adverb. I hope we are right there, Irene.
Yes.
So when you look at this sentence, where is the adjective?
Rich.
Yeah, we are talking about rich. Something else?
Sponge cake.
Not sponge cake, but sponge. Sponge is an adjective.
Yes.
Yes. So therefore, you can see a series of adjectives. He ordered a rich chocolate sponge cake. So sponge cake, the reason why we are calling a rich adjective is because according to Irene, according to this person, who ordered this particular cake, it was rich. It was a rich chocolate. But somebody else might look at this rich chocolate and say, this chocolate is not even rich. I mean, this particular cake is not even rich in, as far as chocolate is concerned. Again, another person might look at that particular cake and say, you are calling this a sponge cake. Then you don't know what a sponge cake is. So therefore, a sponge and rich are totally different things. This one lies under the description of the owner or the buyer. Unless you see it, then that is when you can describe it as rich or as spongy or something like that. So whenever you have a sentence of the same, we do not use commas. Again, we use comma to separate a series of phrases of the same kind. We use comma to separate a series of phrases of the same kind. Like, for example, I'm sharing something here. We use comma. For example, his writing was more refined, more intellectual, more Latinate than Smith's. So when you look at that particular sentence, you come to realize that it has a series of phrases of the same kind. The next point, we use comma before and. We use comma before the and at the end of list where it is necessary for readability. For example, this is my example. The menu was soup. The menu was soup, fish, and chips, and trifle. The menu was soup, comma, fish, and chips, and trifle. So here you can actually see clearly that we have used comma before the and at the end of the list. The end of the list is whereby you're using comma, etc., where it is necessary for readability. So we have the example. Again, we use comma to mark off words that address somebody or something.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sir, I think the sentence that you've given us, the menu was soup, fish, and chips and trifle. I think it's wrongly punctuated.
Why?
Because it's, according to me, it's supposed to read this way. The menu was comma, fish, comma, the and should not be there. So the menu was soup, comma, fish, comma, chips.
Actually.
Then and trifle.
Yeah, the menu was soup, fish, chips, and trifle. Yeah, this one is wrong. Eh?
Yes.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Yeah, now it's supposed to be this. Thank you for your alertness. So the menu was soup, fish, chips, and trifle. Yeah, actually, that's how it should read. Thank you for that. Eh?
Excuse me, teacher.
Yes.
Then, and the point that you have given us, it is saying we use comma beforehand and at the end of the list. I think you are trying to explain about the point that you had given earlier.
No, the point that I had given earlier was we use comma to separate a series of phrases of the same kind. Like when we said his writing was more refined, more intellectual, more Latinate. Which one?
The one you're saying we use comma beforehand at the end of the list.
We use comma beforehand and at the end of a list where it is necessary for readability. And I gave an example. The menu was soup, fish, chips, and trifle. So the second thing that we are, the next thing, which is point number 4, we are supposed to look at another use. I don't know that we are lost. Is that okay? Emma?
You are now. Yeah.
It is okay, or you are confused or something? Is there any confusion?
Sure. In this point, the examples we use it before and at the end of the list.
Oh, okay. Okay, the sentence now, okay, now this one was from Irene. Eh? The menu was soup, fish, chips, and trifle. That one is right, Irene. That sentence is right. But for the sake of understanding, you are being told then you can use it in the middle and then at the end. But now, when you use at the middle, it tends not to be properly punctuated. Because when you're writing a sentence, always avoid using one word twice or thrice. Like avoid using the word and. But for the sake of examples, Irene, then we can use the word and. So then the sentence can read like this. The menu was fish, soup, fish, and chips, and trifle. For the sake of example, we can use the menu was soup, fish, and chips, and trifle. So we can use and for the sake of the example. But at the back of our mind, we can actually say that the sentence is wrongly punctuated. Because the rule of grammar says that one word should not be used more than twice. Avoid using one word more than, frequently, because the sentence will look ambiguous and the sentence will actually not make sense at all. So then we can move to the next use of a comma. So the next use of a comma is to mark off words that address somebody or something. So when you're addressing somebody or something, we usually use comma. A very good example is this one that I'm going to put here, which says, come on, city. So when I put it like this, come on, city, you see we are addressing the come on, city, we are addressing the city. So whenever you are writing something like this, we use comma to mark off that address of somebody or something. We can actually say, come on, Irene, or come on, Esther, or come on, Stephen. You see, so we can use a comma like that. Another use of a comma is to mark off words or phrases such as however, in fact, of course, etc. A good example is this one. Another use of a comma. However, with punctuation, it plays to be careful. However, comma, with punctuation, it plays to be careful. So we can use comma, especially when you are using these kind of words. However, for example, anytime you're using example, for example, there is always a comma. In fact, then you put a comma. Of course, it was marvelous. Of course, comma, it was marvelous. For example, yesterday she was drunk. You see, for example, comma, yesterday she was very drunk. So you can use comma, especially when you're using this group of words. However, example, in fact, of course, etc. We also use a comma to mark off words in parentheses. Maybe Irene, you can tell us what is a parenthesis?
I think I really don't know, but I think it's like brackets.
You don't know and you are saying it right. Huh? Irene.
That yes.
Then there are so many things that you know, that you think that you don't know. For example, I'm giving a sentence here. There are so many things, Irene, that you know that you think you don't know. For example, I'm putting it right here. Born in Brixton, comma. So this one must be in, I'm putting this one in bracket. Born in Brixton. So he became, you can opt to do what? To actually leave the word South London. And you can say, born in Brixton, he became Prime Minister. Born in Brixton, he became Prime Minister, or he became a Prime Minister. So we can put A here. Born in Brixton, he became a Prime Minister. But if you don't want to use parentheses, which are the brackets, you can actually remove them and do what? Replace them with comma. And then we can say, born in Brixton, comma, South London, he became a Prime Minister. So you can use commas to do away with the brackets. And it will all mean the same. Your sentences will all have the same meaning. Any question? Do you have any question? Irene, do you have any question? So we go to something else known as what we call a semicolon. Go to something else known as a semicolon. So a semicolon is written like this. It is written as you have a full stop at the top and at a comma at the bottom, or they are vertically. They are vertically put together. Like, for example, you have a comma at the bottom and a full stop at the bottom. Now, a semicolon. Let me check. A semicolon has got rules on how you should use them. There are actually like 5 rules of how you should use a semicolon. But I'm not going to go to the rules. I'm going to the most common use of a semicolon. So when number 1, we use a semicolon between sentences. We use a semicolon between sentences with or without a conjunction. So whether you have a conjunction, whether you don't have a conjunction, we use them. Whether you have, and when you talk about a conjunction is a word that is joining two clauses together. I would not say phrases. Why would I not say phrases? Because phrases are words that do not make sense on their own. Like, for example, when you talk about run over. Run over is a phrase, is a phrasal verb. It does not make sense on its own. When you talk about throw up is a phrase, is actually a phrasal verb. and it does not make sense on its own. Therefore, you cannot say it can be used with or without. No, you cannot say that one, it can be joined. You cannot join a phrase with another phrase. It will not still make sense. Like when you say, throw over and, let's say, for example, run over. That one is not right. So that's why I'm using clauses. So we are saying that the semicolon between can be used between sentences with or without a conjunction. So they can be used between sentences, they can be used between clauses, they can be used between what we call paragraphs. Paragraphs. Like maybe you want to join this paragraph with another one. And you know, when you have a paragraph, one paragraph usually have a different idea from the other. Like maybe the first paragraph you are talking about, maybe you are describing your dog. And this time around, you're describing, maybe the first paragraph you describe this dog of yours, maybe based on speed. Or maybe you are describing based on, and the next paragraph you're describing it based on the food. You can join those two paragraphs to make one whole paragraph. And the only thing that you can use to join them, you can use a conjunction. So we are saying we can use semicolon between sentences with or without a conjunction. As a longer pause than a comma and a shorter one than a full stop. For example, I'm giving two examples here. For example, so these are examples of semicolon. The rumor was that the king was dead. The rumor was that the king was dead. So you put a semicolon. The people believed it. Full stop. Remember, every sentence, once you're done with a sentence, always put a full stop to actually tell the reader that that is the end of it, or that is the end of that particular sentence. The next example is that there will be an inquest, comma, of course, then semicolon, but. Now you see, the word but is a conjunction. The word but is a conjunction, but the matter will not end there. And always note that whenever you use a semicolon, the sentence that follows a semicolon does not start with a capital letter. Just like the way you use a comma, after a comma, you don't start the following sentence with a capital letter unless it is a proper noun. And when we talk about a proper noun, we are talking about the name of a person, the name of a city, the name of a road, and the name of something else. Sorry for that. There was a lot of noise, so I was trying as much as possible to calm the situation. Anyway, we are saying whenever you are starting a sentence and you had a semicolon before, the sentence that follows should actually be in small letters. It is just like the way you use a comma. Unless the word that follows is the name of a person, or actually it's a proper noun. That's when you use a capital letter. Then the next use of a semicolon, actually these are the major uses of semicolons, is that we use the semicolon to separate longer items in a list, particularly if the items themselves need further punctuation by comma. For example, I'm giving a sentence in a short while. I'm giving a sentence in a short while. For example, punctuation marks, for example, punctuation marks include the full stop. Remember, we are talking about a list of items. Punctuation marks include the full stop, which is the strongest stop. Then we put semicolon. Then the semicolon, which is the weaker, then semicolon. And the comma, which is the weakest of all. So you can actually see the semicolons there to indicate what? We are separating the longer what? The longer sentence. We are separating the longer sentence, no, the longer item in a list. Then we have something else after that. Is there any question on semicolon? And we are not saying that those are the end. I mean, those are the only uses of semicolon. Actually, semicolon has got various uses. It has got various uses. And my homework would be go and read more on the uses of semicolons. So whatever I'm giving you, these are actually the most important uses of semicolons. So the next one, of course, is what we call the colons. Is there any question before we go to the colons? Steven, do you have any question? So Irene doesn't have any question. Emma, do you have any question?
No. No.
Steven? Steven, is there any question? Steven seems to be very far. Okay. Then we can look at the colon. And we are saying that there are two principles. There are two principal uses of the semicolon in news writing. One is that at the start of the list, you can use it at the start of the list. And the second is when going from attribution into a quote. Let's see how you can use it as at the start of a list. Let's see how you can use a semicolon at the start of a list. And this is an example I'm giving. The judge said. So this is how you start at the start of the list. This is not the first time I have had to deal with this kind of case. This is not the first time I had to deal with this kind of case. Or we can have this particular kind of an example. Or we can remove that or, the word or there. So you can actually see these are the uses of a semicolon. You can use it at the first. You can use it at the beginning of a sentence. You can also use a colon in preferences to the comma. This will mean you can use it to introduce full sentences, quotes. For example, you can use to, for example, you are told that he said, punctuation is difficult. He said punctuation is difficult. So this is a quote. So I'm quoting it. He said punctuation is difficult. Whenever you are quoting something, ensure that you start first of all with other punctuation marks, then you do what? You end your quote. So in short, we are saying that other punctuation marks should be inside the quotation marks, not outside the quotation marks. For example, the last sentence, he said, punctuation is difficult. So punctuation is difficult is in quote. So you don't end the quote, then you put a full stop. You put the full stop, then you end the quote. I hope that one is clear. So again, we use colon to introduce a list of items. We use colons to introduce a list of items. For example, all of them were dead. Now we're asking ourselves, who are these all of them? So you put colon so that you can introduce a list of items. Jack, comma, Ted, comma, no, Ted and Willie. If we were to add another person, then we would not have and here. We would have like comma, Willie, maybe and James. Then you end your quote. So most of the time you use colon to do what? To show a list of items. Another use of a semicolon is it can be used between sentences where the second justifies or the second sentence explains the first. A very good example is this one. This is another example whereby the first sentence, the second sentence explains the first sentence. Keep your language uncluttered. The example is keep your language uncluttered. Then semicolon, colon, it reads more easily. So when you look at the word, it reads more easily, it explains why you should keep your language uncluttered. So semicolon can be used when the sentence before explains the previous sentence. Keep your language, like for example, keep your language uncluttered, colon, it reads more easily. So it reads more easily. So it tells you that when you keep your language uncluttered, it is going to be read more. It makes you, or it makes it being read easily. So it explains why you should keep actually your language uncluttered. The next point, use semicolon between two sentences to mark an antithesis. To mark an antithesis. What is an antithesis? An antithesis is a contrast. It's the opposite. For example, man proposes, God disposes. So you can use it like this. This is an example I'm giving. You can say man proposes, God disposes. So if a man proposes, then God disposes. So is an antithesis, or this is actually a what? An opposition. So it shows some kind of opposition. Any question? So you can use that particular Kuna swali? So the last use of a semicolon is the semicolon in a picture caption. When we said that a picture caption is the words below the picture, especially when you're reading a newspaper and there are some photographs there, you will see some explanation about what the picture is all about. Like, say, for example, it is President Uhuru giving Raila Odinga a handshake. You'll come and then there are several people around them. The person writing the caption will say, starting from the left is the minister of this, then this, and then Uhuru Kenyatta giving a handshake to something like that. So that particular wording at the bottom of the picture explaining what the picture is all about, or explaining the subject in that particular picture, are what we call the captions. So then we are saying that the colon in a picture, use the colon in a picture caption to connect the person or object in the picture with the rest of the caption. I know you don't understand this. Maybe we can put it in writing. For example, this is what I mean. Victorious. Maybe, for example, it is a caption. This is Napoleon seated down, or maybe having a breakfast with his maybe his cabinet or his friends. Then you can have a caption: Victorious Napoleon. Or the caption can read like this: Napoleon, victory is ours. So you're trying to connect the situation that he is in with the person. You're trying to create or to bring about the relationship between a certain activity and the person in that particular picture. Napoleon, victory is ours. Unless there is a question on that. Do you have any question? We don't. But if you have any question as we proceed, maybe you can ask a question. So the next one is what we call an apostrophe. Apostrophe. So all of us know how an apostrophe is written. And because we are so silent, maybe I can ask Stephen, when do we use an apostrophe? When do we use an apostrophe?
Let's say when you're to shorten a sentence, like what is the matter, you put an apostrophe on what, then it reads what's the matter.
Oh, okay. Anyway, it's okay. Now, Irene, why do you use, or when do we use an apostrophe?
I also had Stephen's idea, used to shorten words.
Only that?
Yes.
I thought an apostrophe has got various meanings. I mean, various uses. Maybe you can start a sentence by saying, I don't know, but it is used. I think you'll be right. Irene.
Pardon?
I'm saying this, just start the way you usually
Yes.
start answering the question by saying, I don't know, but, and then you say the right answer.
I don't have an answer. I only knew Steven's answer only.
What about Emma?
I think when writing, is it when quoting, as in writing in direct speech?
An apostrophe. I'm giving an example, not giving an example, but I'm asking a question. When I write this word there, companies, and I write another one like this, what is the meaning of, wait a minute, and I write another one like this. What is the meaning of those two words? Company, companies, with an apostrophe between Y and S, and companies with an apostrophe at the end of the letter S.
Let me try.
Okay.
The first one, the one where the apostrophe comes before S, it's used to, maybe like you're referring to something inside the company. Let's say the systems company is not working well. Let's say the electricity systems company is not working well. You're referring to something inside that company. And the second one where the apostrophe comes at the end, it's when you're referring to the different company.
Different company.
Yes.
Give us an example.
Various. Let's say the companies that distribute. I don't have a relevant example. I don't know how to explain the second one.
Now, when you talk about companies, the first one. The first one refers to ownership. The first one refers to ownership. Like, for example, when you talk about Irene's pen, you will use this one, the first one. It refers to ownership. When you use an apostrophe like company, you're talking about maybe the various companies. The various companies. You can also be talking about, what do we call it? You can also be talking about, can I remember? You actually, you're talking about various companies. Like companies, when you talk about various companies, like for example, our companies, talking about them, then maybe it applies there. I'm not sure, but I'll look into it. So let's look at the importance of apostrophe. So we are told that there are various or several uses of apostrophe, and the most common is to show possession. Like the first one shows what we call possession. It shows ownership. So we use in front, for example, the fire last night destroyed, like for example, let me give an example here. And this one shows what we call possession. The fire last night destroyed the company's printery. It destroyed the company's main printery. So you can see the apostrophe comes after the Y. After the Y. So it is between Y and S. I mean Y and S. The company's showing actually this one, that sentence shows possession. The next one, when you're talking about plural or many countries, or many companies, then the country, the apostrophe comes after the word companies, the second one. Maybe we can give an example here to show plural. Frank's jokes were a great success at his parents' anniversary party. So look at the word parents. The word parents, you come to realize that an apostrophe comes after the letter S. This shows there are many what? Parents. Not one parent, but there are many parents in that particular anniversary. Then the next use of what we call a semicolon is that it is used in contraction in places of missing letters or missing numbers. For example, I'm giving an example right away. This is an example I'm giving. I don't know why there is some problem here in anyway. I'll sort it out. This is another example. In the 34, you can see how the apostrophe has been used. In the 34, gold rush, comma, minus. In the 34 gold rush, comma, miners couldn't get to Bulolo quickly enough, he said. So in the 34. So whenever you see this kind of scenario, it actually shows that there is what we call contraction. So there is what we call the missing numbers. So when you talk about the 34, it means that maybe he's talking about 1934 gold rush. Maybe he's talking about, yeah, something like that. He's talking about 1934 gold rush. Or when you talk about 20s, in the 20s, like for example, you mean in 1920s. Huh? So maybe we are talking about late 20s. Maybe you're talking about, instead of writing maybe late 1920s, you're talking about late 20s. So you start with the late 20s. So like what I've given there, instead of saying in 19, because late 1920s is maybe late 1920s, or maybe late 1950s or something like that, you use the apostrophe to mean that there is something that is missing before it. And that might be 19, the letter 19, or maybe 2020 or something like that. Unless there is a question, I go to something else. So I move to something else, and I'm looking at what we call the brackets. So let's see what the bracket they are used for. So number one, they are meant to contain extra details within a sentence. So when you put something in bracket, you're actually doing what? You are containing extra details in that particular sentence. For example, when you talk about a surgeon suffering from acquired immune deficiency syndrome, so you put in bracket AIDS has been sacked from his job in the country's main hospital. So you're putting the word AIDS in bracket. So, and we have various uses of bracket apart from one, actually, that particular one. And as far as this topic are concerned, maybe I can give an assignment. Okay, we have not looked at the various, all of them, because we have several. Like, for example, we have not looked at what we call the hyphen. We have not looked at the hyphen. So go and look at, find out how the hyphen is used, or what are the uses of a hyphen. I also want you to go and look at the uses of a slash. When do you use a slash? When do we use maybe question mark? When do we use exclamation marks? Exclamation marks. Also go and check on when we use what we call, we have exclamation marks, we have question marks. We have so many, what we call, so many, we have so many what we call punctuation marks that you should also go and check. But as far as you are concerned, let's also look at hyphen, also dashes. Some people call hyphen dashes. Look at dashes, even though I'm going to give notes on dashes and hyphens. etc, etc. The reason why I'm looking at the four, because we usually call them the four main stops. So somebody can ask you, what are the four main stops? So when somebody asks you the four main stops, number one, you should be able to tell him of, to be able to speak of the capital, or leave alone the capital letter, but you should be able to talk about the full stop. That is one stop. You should be able to talk about the comma. Comma is another stop. You should be able to talk about the semicolon. Semicolon is the third stop. And the colon. Colon is the fourth stop. So when you talk about the four main stops in English, they are the colons, the semicolons, the full stop, and the comma. That's why I've looked at those four things. So unless there is a question, I will stop there. And I want us to go and read more about the other, the one that I've listed down, the other what? The other punctuation marks. That is the hyphen, the slash, the question mark, the exclamation mark, and the dashes. Do you have any question? Irene, you want to tell me something?
Yes, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are we submitting this assignment? And if it's so, how are we supposed to add an assignment? I don't know how it's done.
Now, this is an assignment. This is for your own use. Just go and read more on the hyphen, the slash, the question marks, the exclamation mark, and the dashes. Even though I said that in the notes that I'm going to open right away, there is dashes and the hyphens. But the most important, especially when it comes to exam, sometimes the exam can, a question can come, right? Describe the four main stops used in English grammar. Just know that you're talking about the comma, the full stop, the comma, the full stop,
Semicolon
the semicolon, and the colons. Do you have any other question?
and
So right away, I'm opening the notes for this particular course. So go and read them. So we meet next week. Hope that everything will be okay. So tuonane next week.